Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and tonight we're going to be talking about a film which I just finished watching. It was my third viewing of it ever, and this is the first video in a planned 12 videos in my Mortality in Literature and Film course this year. And so I just finished watching Vagabond by Agnes Varda. And like I said, this was the third time I had seen it. I saw it many, many years ago, and then I watched it a couple years ago with the church book and movie group that I had. And so Vagabond came out in the mid-'80s, and it's one of three films I think that Agnes Varda is probably best known for. So she is a French New Wave director, and the movie that she made that was most famous, I suppose, in her kind of 1960s French New Wave period, I want to say it came out in the early 60s, was a movie called Cleo from 5 to 7. And then, like I said, this came out in the mid-'80s, and then in the early 2000s, she directed a documentary called The Gleaners and I, which was very well received and is quite good. But she's still alive. She's still making films. She's been making films for a very long time. And Vagabond is a film that is situated right in the wheelhouse of this project of mine. So it begins with a man who is essentially clearing brush in a vineyard in the French countryside, and on a winter morning, and he comes upon a dead young woman on the vineyard grounds, and they report it to the police, and the police come, etc., etc. And what the movie does is it works sort of, all right, so it gives us the end point, and then it goes back like a month, and roughly a month, and then it follows this young woman, this vagabond, this drifter, and shows us how she has arrived at this point, at the point of her death, and it's brilliant the way it's constructed, right? So it gives us the various encounters that she has, the situations that she experiences with various people, people from all walks of life, right? There's a gas station owner, there's a college professor who's an arborist who's trying to rid the plane trees of France of this kind of canker that they're affected by. There's this goat herder, philosopher with his wife and their child and their 100 goats, squatters, all sorts of people that she encounters along the way. And what the film does is it gives us her experiences with them, and it also gives us kind of moments of, they're almost like interviews, right? Some of them, the characters are speaking directly to the camera, where the characters discuss or talk about their impressions of her. And the most moving of these, I think, is so there's a Tunisian man who had been kind of educating her in vine cutting and sort of cutting back this vineyard during its off time of year, and he treated her with such kindness, and she spent probably the most time with him. And then the other vine cutters came back from presumably visiting their own countries, and they've decided that they don't want a woman in the house, and so he concedes and essentially kicks her out. All right, that's a harsh way of putting it, but that's essentially what happens. And while she's there, she wears a scarf that he has given her, and she, in anger, leaves the scarf behind. And near the end of the film, when there's the moment where he is going to be interviewed or going to be spoken to about his memories of her, his impressions of her, he doesn't say anything to the camera. He just looks straight into the camera, and he's holding the scarf, and he puts it up to his face, and he smells it. And it's incredibly moving. And what I love most about this film is that this film, Vagabond, insists that we acknowledge that all people, no matter their walk of life, no matter their circumstances, no matter the conditions in which they live, it insists that we acknowledge that all of them have a story, and that in some way a person's death is the end result of their story, the final chapter of their story. And so many times we see people hitchhiking, we see homeless people begging for money in our towns, we see reports of people in newspapers, etc., and we look the other way. I'm guilty of this too. And who knows what becomes of those people. I'm reminded, actually, strangely, of Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, right, where he's living the same day over and over and over again. And one of the people that he encounters in that living the same day over and over again is this old homeless man, and he tries to essentially, take him to restaurants and feed him soup and this, that, and the other thing, and he's trying desperately to keep him alive. But at the end of each day, there's nothing that he can do. The man still dies, and it makes you wonder, what was that man's story? What were his experiences? What was his life like? And that's what Vagabond does, is it reminds us that whoever we are, however much or however little money we have, we are the product of our experiences. And when we die, our death is the closing of the book that has been our life. And I think the film asks us to remember to treat the people we encounter more gently, I suppose. So many of the people that she encounters take advantage of her, and I mean, to be fair, she's quite rough around the edges as well. She's a little bit of a piece of work, but in the end, that doesn't matter, or that shouldn't matter, right? However much a pain in the ass someone is, or however much we feel like they're inviting their fate on themselves by, shirking civilization, or by, holding kind of social mores and customs in contempt. Regardless of any of that, each of us is a person, is a life, is an accretion of stories and encounters. And we all have mothers, we all have fathers, many of us have siblings, and we all have favorite songs. Most of us, have had first kisses. And when we remember that about the people we encounter, or about the people we read about who've died, whether, it's someone whose body was discovered, frozen in our town, or, someone in a war zone, or what have you, or even someone who's been executed, for instance, on death row. It's imperative that we remember that those people were people, and that they were loved, and that they had dreams, and that they fell short of many things, and that their lives didn't turn out the way they thought they would, as none of our lives do, actually. No matter how good any of us have it, we always anticipate things are going to be different than they turn out to be. So anyhow, that's Vagabond. It was wonderful seeing it again after a couple of years, and it's part of a box set of 4 films, 4 by Agnes Varda, the Criterion Collection box set, including Cleo from 5 to 7. I have yet to watch the other 2 films in this collection, just because that's the way I am. I have many movies, or not many movies, I guess, but a number of movies that we've owned for years and years now that I still haven't got around to. But she's a hell of a filmmaker. If memory serves, she was married to, I think, Jacques Demy, who was another French New Wave filmmaker, and who's most famous for his two musicals, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Young Girls of Rochefort, which are two of my favorite films of all time. But Vagabond is pretty extraordinary. So if you watched it with me for this project, I look forward to your comments below, or even your videos if you're making videos. And if you haven't watched Vagabond yet, please do. It's definitely worth a look, and it's a brilliant kind of meditation on both, I think, the finality of death, and also I think the poignancy of how our lives are kind of compilations of stories, really, compilations of memories, compilations of regrets, and essentially lead us to the grave. So that's that. That's Vagabond. I will see you guys again very soon with the video on the second half of this Republic of Suffering. In the meantime, adios.